Tonight from Shir Gimel, which is step number 6. Now, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. In the last 2 shiurim, we reviewed the actual text of the Gemara. I'm going to walk you to a tool that we have in our workbook series that I hope you'll find very helpful. And I'm skipping now to the back of this section of the book. So this is the end of Shir Vav. Okay, this is after Shir Vav, after we conclude this entire sugya. Sugya means a topic. One feature that we have in this series is that at the end of every sugya is a complete topic. Some sugyas could be much shorter. This is a relatively short one. There's only 6 shiurim, 6 lessons. Some of them are much longer and more complicated. But one of the things that we do is we have, and there's again a lot of literature and research to support this educationally, we do an assisted review. An assisted review means that, for example, here, you're given most of the information that you need, and you just have to fill in like a few words here and there. But basically, you're given a lot of information. Again, using these icons like we have. I'll go through it now. Instead of going, that's what I meant, instead of doing the Gemara inside, Shir He Shivav, which we did not do. Maskana means the final end of the Gemara. Here is the actual text of the Gemara. And then we go to an unassisted review. And an unassisted review is where you just say a much shorter, you don't have to write in detail like we did with the assisted review, but you just write very briefly, but it helps. I found it extraordinarily helpful to do this in order to be able to not only review all of the Gemara, but to be able to follow the bouncing ball. Parenthetically, I was in Israel a number of years ago. It was about the time of the Siyum Hashas, which is the Siyum is a festive occasion, a party that's made when we finish a Gemara. And people learn Daf Yomi, learn 1 page of Gemara a day. It's 2,700 and something days, 2,711, I believe. And at the end, we just had one recently on January 1st. It was in the Meadowlands, a football stadium in New Jersey. So there was a Siyum Hashas in Israel when I was there, and the secular media, it was a big deal because the Orthodox population was all buzzing about it, and they interviewed Rabbi Silber. His name is. He at the time was probably the most prolific shiur giver, Rebbe of Daf Yomi. I think he was giving 5 shiurim a day in Daf Yomi at the time. I think he was giving some on the radio, and it was a big deal. And they asked, I happened to have heard the interview, and as an educator, my ears started to tingle. And they asked them to tell me, how did you become you? Were you a brilliant student? How did you become such a prolific Maggid Shiur, lecturer? And he described exactly this process. Again, it was putting a seed in my mind, even though I wasn't really tuned in on that level, but the thought was there. And he said that all of my friends used to go on to the next Gemara, and they used to say, come on, stop it, come on, let's go, we're moving on already. And he said, I never left. I used to take it. He really described this without the color coding and stuff. He would write down step by step by step, so that he had it. And he said, I was tenacious. I didn't leave until I had that clearly in my mind. So what this looks like here would be matzah, pears, mufuzar, and that's the first one. If you found scattered fruit, right, you're allowed to keep it. The Gemara asks a she'el of the kama, how much does it have to be? The answer is kav ba'arba amas. So like that would take you through the first 3 of these. That's what it looks like in an unassisted review. And when we have an assisted review, and let's just do this quickly as part of our chazara. Chazara means review. Rather than review it inside the Gemara, let's just do this as an exercise. Okay, so the memra, our sugya topic, began with a memra, a statement. That's this thought, the quote bubble, right? That's called that denotes a memra, a statement, right? So this we call. Oops, we need it thicker than this and darker. So that denotes a memra, which is a statement. Just a moment, please. Okay, so we begin with the memra, which quoted in our Mishnah, the halacha that was quoted, that if someone finds scattered fruit, the finder is allowed to keep it. Okay, that's step number one. Step number two, we have a she'ela. So the Gemara asked, how much? Right? That's just a she'ela. It's not a kasha, it's a general question. How much does he have to have? How scattered does it have to be in order to be able to keep it? And the Gemara answers, the she'ela is answered, that the produce is considered scattered if it's a one kav in an area of 4 amas. So now the Gemara asks a question, and we had a nice illustration of that. Let me just go back to the visual tool. We had that, the two paths, the fork in the road, so to speak, with the and that was our kasha. What was he talking about? Just a moment. Did I pass it? No, here it is. Right? We had Amar Rab Yitzchak kav ba'arba amas, and we had a question. If that was, so again, going back here, okay, we checked off this, we did 3, we did 2, we did 1. Now we're up to 4. So the question that we're asking here, the kasha that we're asking, the target of the kasha, right, was the statement of kav ba'arba amas. The Gemara asks that the amount of produce shouldn't make a difference. If it was found in a neat way, then the finder, if it was scattered, then the finder should be allowed to keep it regardless of the amount, because the guy gave up hope. On the other hand, if the produce was found and neatly put away, then the owner should not be allowed to keep the finder of it should not be allowed to keep it, no matter what. Okay, so this was the question of Rabbi Yitzchak, that he said, well, what's Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? He said it's a kav ba'arba amas, 1 kav and 4 amas. So if it was placed there, if it had been placed neatly, so the finder cannot keep it, because obviously the fellow's coming back for it. And if it fell, then we would say, if it fell, then he's allowed to keep it right away. So here's the question, right? There doesn't seem to be any situation. Here's what we're asking. There doesn't seem to be any situation to which Rabbi Yitzchak's din would apply, which of course poses a question. So what's Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? It can't be either one of those. Okay, so again, back to this. So that's the question. What was Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? So the Gemara answers that we had a mistaken opinion. We had a havamina, an original thought that we were talking about. That it was an aveda, it fell, and or it was just something that was lost. Rather, we call it an aveda midas. It was lost with knowledge. Okay, here's the Gemara. Amar Avuk for Bachama, the Machnashta de Beidari Askinan. We're talking about a threshing floor, right? So here was the threshing floor, and they separated the chaff from the wheat there, and therefore the guy knows that he left it there. So it's just a question of how much. And we had a havamin again, the original. Let's zoom in on this. We use this icon throughout the Gemara. When we have a havamina, we thought that the Mishnah havamina means I first thought. The Gemara was discussing grain that was lost. Here's the operative word. We thought that we're talking about grain that was lost, and the maskana is, the final is that the Mishnah there's grain that they knowingly left behind. He knowingly left it behind on the threshing floor. So then it's not a question if you put it neat or disorganized, whether it was nefila or not. That's the teretz. Teretz is an answer again, and that fixes up this breach that this is the leaning tower of whatever, because we had a kasha. So that goes back again. If you're going back to Shakla V'Tarya, so the kasha is answered. He explains that the kusha was based on the havamina, that we were talking about something that was lost, that fell, and we're talking about aveda midas, something that came with knowledge. And now we start with Shir Gimel. We're going to review and go into it. The Gemara starts asking, how about if you have 2 kav in 8 amas? What happens if you have half a kav in 2 amas? And we'll see in the remaining shiurim, we're going to go to similar notions of this type of thinking, different amounts, and how would that play on how we would think about going back? Is it something that's considered an Aveda or not? Okay, so this was the first 5 steps. So let's just quickly review. We did this yesterday's share. So the first 2 shiurim we clarified about Peres Mufazaran, and now we said that 1 kav and 4 amas. So let's go over the Gemara. Ba'i Rab Chama, Rabbi Yirmiyah. I'm sorry, again, no translation, no punctuation. You have it here. Just concentrate on the logic. Ba'i Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah asks a question. Chatzi kav, a half a kav, b'shtei amas mahu. If he loses half a kav, half the amount, in half the space, what's the ruling? Mahu, what's the halacha? And what does it depend on? Again, smaller space, a smaller amount. So here's the question. Kav ba'arba amas time mamai. Why is it a kav and arba amas? Mishum de nafesh tirchayu. Again, there are 2 things that would matter. One is how much of a bother is it to collect it? How spread out is it? And the other is it enough? Is it enough gain for the person to sit down and start bending down and scratching stuff off the floor? So is it more important that the value of the objects, or is it the amount of bother? So we have to dig into this. Kav ba'arba amas time am I? Why did we say kav ba'amas? Mishum de nafesh tirchaya, because it's a great bother. Well, chatzi kav b'shtei amas, if it's much less bother, kivin de loy nafesh tirchayu, loy mafkele, maybe he won't make it hefker, and maybe he'll go back for it, in which case the person can't keep it. Adilma, maybe mishum de loy chashivi, maybe it's really because the reason that it's only a kav in 4 amas is because a guy's not going to go back for a kav. It's not worth it. It's not that much money that he would go and put himself out like that. So maybe he doesn't go back because it's not chashiv. In that case, so he would give up hope in this situation. Okay, so here's another visual aid here. So let's start here. 1 kav and 4 amas, the owner won't come back. So if the value is the greater issue here, if that's what's more striking, what makes a bigger difference, if it's the value here, then we'll say less value, so he won't come back to find it can keep it because there's only half a kav. However, if he's 61 years old, like the guy who's giving shir, and he doesn't want to bend over, that's bothering him more. So it's too much. It's less of a bother. Maybe for half if it's only in two amas, maybe he'll say, all right, whatever. I'll just take a couple. I'll bend down a couple of times and get it, even if it's not that much money. Okay, so that was basically the question. We don't really come to a conclusion, and now we're going to go to the next one, to Shir Daled. Like I said, this is the same type of format of structured logic that really runs for the rest of the Gemara. Okay, that's the good news. Bad news is you might not get that much experience with different types of learning, but I think it's good to get your feet wet with this. I think it's very helpful. So now Shir Gimel, we had a Sheila. What's with a half a kav in 2 amas? So now the Gemara asks a question. Well, let's ask a similar Sheila. By the way, this is not that common that we have a Sheila followed by a Sheila. That's not that common in the Gemara for obvious reasons, but here it's a continuation of the question. Kabayim, 2 kav here, okay, 2 kav. If one found, again, this is the whisper, right? If somebody found 2 kavim of kernels, b'shmona amas and 8 amas, that is twice the size, mahu, what's the din? So we will go to the exact same scenario. Again, here's 2 kavim, kabayim. Kabayim is, plural, 2 kav. So if he has 2 kav, let's see, the Gemara is going to go over this same logic. So kav is a huge space. If there's a kav in 2 kav in 8 amas, will he go back? So that's why I said it's the logical structure is the same, because it's basically the same type of discussion. Is it why is a kavan 4 amas? What's the issue? Is it, slip discs in your back? You don't want to, it's the bother, or is it not enough value? So the reverse would apply here. So kav ba'arba amas, let's look into this. One kavan 4 amas time amai. Why was he allowed to keep it? Mishum denafish tirchayu, because it's a great bother for them. V'kol shekain, that's an abbreviation. Kol shekain, certainly. Kabayim b'shmona amas, if the guy's afraid of his back and he doesn't want to hurt himself, or he doesn't want to go through that back-breaking labor, literally. So for 8 amas, for sure he's not going to go. Even the nafish terchayu, tvei mafgalahu. Tvei means more. He's even more likely to make it hefker. Okay, so if 2 kav and 8 amas involve more bother than 1 kav and 4 amas, so for sure he won't go back. However, if the main question is, bottom line, is it enough money for me to bother myself to go back? That's what the person who found it would think about. Dilma, maybe mishum delay chashivi. Is the more important reason, that's a word that, this word chashiv we do have in our vernacular, generally speaking, delay chashivi, it's not chashiv. Chashiv means prominent. Usually when we say about a person, he's the chashiv a person, right? But here, it doesn't have, has enough value to it. Since he doesn't go back for a kav and 4 amas because 1 kav is not enough, kabayim b'shmona amas, if he has 2 kav, kivan the chashivi, since it's chashiv, loy mafgalahu, he won't make it hefker. Okay? So again, these are basically 2 sides of the same coin. The details are different, but the concept is the same. So here we go, 1 kav and 4 amas, the owner will not come back. So here's the question here on the bottom, right? What happens if you have 2 kav and 8 amas? So again, if slip discs is the problem, if bending down is the problem, for sure the guy's not coming back. So, right, if the guy's wearing a back brace and he says, forget it, kav and 2 and 4 amas, I'm not going back for, I'm going to hurt myself. So surely he won't go back for 2 kav because it's in a larger space. Okay. However, it's the monetary value that's more important. Well, maybe this is worth it. The guy's young and strong, and he doesn't care about, he says, I can deal with this. So he's more likely to go back. Okay, that's the end of this sugya. And let's just do a quick review. Okay, let's just translate. Kabayim b'shmona amas, mahu. What's the question? What's the question about kav and 4 amas? Is the reason because of bother? And certainly 8 amas is a much bigger bother, so he'll give up hope. If it's not chashiv, kav and 8 amas is not chashiv, so that he might decide to go back. What type of step is this? Again, this is a she'ela, it's a question, and this follows the question that we had in the Gemara about half a kav and 2 amas is basically the mirror image. It's the opposite, but the same type of question that we had before. Again, this is all simple. This is only 1 step. And again, we can go back now, reviewing the first 4 shiurim. Matzah Paris Mufuzarin. I believe this was the number of the steps here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number the steps. So matzah. Remember if you remember at the beginning, we were loaded up with a lot of quick steps one after the other, and then it opened up a little bit. Excuse me. So matzah Paris Mufuzarin. This is a 1. He found Paris Mufuzarin. This is a memra. Let's stop here. Excuse me. Okay, so this is step 1, ends over there at the end. Matzah Paris Mufuzarin. If he found Paris that are spread out. Now 2, we're going to ask Vikama, and how much, which ends right here. Vikama, how much is that amount? What is the amount that's the right number for this? And the Gemara answers, we start with 3 here. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, Kav ba'arba amas. Kav ba'arba amas, that ends this. Okay, now we start with the question, Hechidami, what's this talking about? Iderach nefila excuse me, so this is, I'm sorry about that, this is 4. So we're asking iderech nefila, if it was falling down, afila tuvanami, if it fell and the guy didn't look like he was going to keep it, so not come back for it, so you can keep it. Iderech hinuach, if he placed it there, afila batzim yachinami, even if it's less than that, you shouldn't be able to. So that ends over here. We come with an answer. This is step 5. By the way, you might find it helpful if you're working off a Gemara, excuse me, especially again at the beginning, it might be helpful to you to really number it like that, or make a tiny dot or something to help you break the steps down. This is in the Gemara itself. Again, that if this review does it without the Gemara. This is an oral. This is not related to text. This is an oral repeat of the Gemara. Okay, and here we're working off text. Amar of Ukva Barchama answers, "B'machnashta de beidari askinan." We're talking about a threshing, a place where threshing was done, and so we call it. The words we used was, you don't need to know it in Hebrew, aveda midas. So it was an aveda purposely. It wasn't done. It wasn't done accidentally. Quite to the contrary, it was purposeful. I need a darker shade for this. Okay, so let's do this. So we're up to step 5. Amar Rav Ukva Barchama. Rav Ukva Barchama answers, "Machnashtu de beidari askin." We're talking about a threshing floor. Kav ba'arba amis, 1 kav and 4 amis. The nafesh terchayu. It's a great bother. Loi tarach ina. She won't bother. V'loi hader asi. He's not going to come get it. V'shakalahu. So afkure mafkalahu. He'll make it hefker. Afkuri mafked, we find this in Hebrew and Aramaic. It's a noun and a verb together. Afkure mafked. It's a little clumsy when you're translating it, but he's mafked. Okay, batzer mihachi. If it's less than that, if it's less than that, if it's not 4 amas, so shakalahu will take it. V'lai mafkalahu, and therefore he won't make it hefker. Here ends step 5. And now we come to the next question, right? We have a she'ela followed by a she'ela, and now we're just going to ask a different. We're going to ask this in a different way. We're up to step 6 here. Rav Yirmi asked the question. Chatzi kav b'shtei amas mahu. How about if you have 2 kavim? Kav ba'arba amas taimamai mishum denafesh terchayu, because it's such a big bother. Chatzi kav b'shtei amas. If the bother is the issue, right? It's chatzi kav b'shtei amas, then loy mafkalahu, you won't make it hefker. Dilma, if it's loy chashiv, it's not important enough, chatzi kav b'shtei amas is certainly not chashiv, so for sure he will be mafker. And that's the end of this question. This was a she'ela. He was asking a general question, right? A request for information. Please clarify which of the 2 sides is more important. Is it the bother, or is it the amount of value? Okay, so that's step number 6. And step number 7, we have another go at another she'ela. This is step number 7. So kabayim b'shmona amas, the mirror image of that. What happens if you have 1 kav in 8 amas? If you say kav ba'arba amas time amai, what was the reason for kav ba'arba amas? Mishum denafesh terchayu, since it was such a bother. Because you can't kabayim b'shmona amas. Certainly, if 2 kav in 8 amas is a bother, because since it's nafesh terchayu, he will be mafked. No way he's going back. The 61-year-old with the bad back, with the back brace, isn't going. If he's not going for 1 kav in 4 amas, he's certainly not going for 2 in 8 amas. Or a dilma. No, maybe it's just because it's not worth it. It's not enough of value. The kabayim b'shmona amas, even the chashivi, loy mafkalahu, he won't be mafkeret. End of story. Okay. Now so we have these 7 steps here. Let's really, I believe this is the last work segment. Yes, and we'll get tomorrow. We'll do shiurim hey and vav, which also follow this type of logical pattern. Now, I want to point out something about this flow chart. Okay, the statements and how these lines fit in. Okay, anybody want to hazard a guess what this, folks? Let's chat a bit. Let's take the chat here. Okay, anybody want to hazard a guess? Why is it that obviously the page, we would have run out of space, but in this case, this logical, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all like, are all in a straight line, and 6 and 7 are coming off this. It's a branch. Anybody want to hazard a guess, folks? Think about what the steps are. You know what? Let me go through them with you. Okay. Someone finds scattered fruit. This is from the Mishnah. We ask a she'ela, how much? Right? That was the question. How much does it have to be? And we answered, it's 1 kav. I'm sorry about this, folks. In 4 amas. That was the answer. It's 1 kav and 4 amas. So the Gemara asks a question. Hold it. Right? What's Rabbi Yitzchak talking about? Was it placed or was it lost? And we answer, it's talking about a threshing circle. Machnashta de Beidari. It's talking about a threshing circle that has spots of grain all over it. The guy knew that he left it there, so that answers this. So here's my question again. Why does number 6 not follow at the end of this line? Anybody, folks? Okay. So we got a hand up. 1 second, please. Where did the chat go? Just a moment. Hang on a second. I'm trying to find it. Where did it disappear to? Here we go. I imagine it was under physical difficulty. Oh, you mean, so you're saying it's following. So thank you for responding. The question here, okay, the question of this was half a kav in, I'm sorry, one moment, just a moment. Right. This question of half a kav in 2 amas, right? Half a kav in 2 amas. Okay, half a kav in 2 amas and 2 kav in 8 amas. These questions actually, think of where they go back on. These 2 questions aren't on Machnashta de Beidari, right? So look at this. It's not going back on Machnashta de Beidari. This question was, well, how would it be talking about? We thought it was lost, so it was rather left behind on purpose. That is I wouldn't say a distraction, but that continues. But really, this question really belongs after the 1 quarter. Think about it, right? If you're following the flow of the Gemara going from step to step, step 4 and 5 is like a self-contained unit that comes at the bottom. But really, this question of half a kav in 2 amas and 2 kav in 8 amas really goes back to this. Okay, so therefore, later on it gets a little more confusing. It gets a little more confusing not later on. In Yishul Amidas, when we have very complicated, Yishul Amidas has 30 steps, over 30 steps. So the flow chart gets a little more intense. But this is a good way. This was step 5. Step 5 redefines. 5 is here. Redefines step 3. Right. Correct, Mel. Right. Step 5 explains what. Oh, that's what you're saying. So therefore, we go to that. Is that what you meant? Right. So it flows from 3. Very good, Mel. Mel, can I make you a co-host? I can do that here. Mel, you're on ball. It's the second or third time that you really explain things in a different way. Very well. So hear what Mel says. Mel explained it better than me. Thank you. Mel, I got to call you Rebbe from now on. So look what how Mel explained it. When we said, again, let's follow. Scattered fruit you're allowed to keep. Well, how much? 1 kav and 4 amas. Now, we had a misconception of what 1 kav and 4 amas meant. We thought it was that a guy dropped a kav and 4 amas. We thought that it was something that he lost or he set aside and forgot about it. Now we find out, after this question, this is what Mel was saying. Look what he wrote, folks. Look at this chat here. I'm not sure if you all can see it. I hope you can. Step 5 redefines step 3. We're saying that really this icon here, I wish I could do a cut and paste here. This icon of finding of a machnashta de beidari, where you have a space with a lot of with little pieces of grain there in the threshing field, and the guy left it behind on purpose. That's what 3 means. That's what how Mel explained it. I explained it a little bit differently. I think Mel's is much more clear than what I said. So therefore, what we're saying is, once we came with step 5, that means that we're saying that when we said a kav, when Rabbi Yitzchak said a kav in 4 amas, he meant to say a kav in 4 amas that was in a threshing floor that the person purposely left behind. In other words, with the benefit of time, we clarified what Rabbi Yitzchak said, and Rabbi Yitzchak was talking about machnashta de beidari, about a threshing floor. We just didn't know it at the time. We had a mistaken opinion. Now, 1/2 of a kav and 2 amas and 2 over 8 both go back to step 3. Not only does step 6, look at this, follow this, folks, please. Okay, this is an important part of following logical flowcharts and logical steps here. So again, think about it. Step 3, when we finished step 3, step 3 was broken. We didn't understand it properly. So we had to go through this process where we asked the question of, right? We asked the question, well, what do you mean? Is it either it's lost or it's not lost? What's the difference how much it is? Okay? And then we answered, no, you had it wrong. You had it wrong. We weren't talking about a lost object. We were talking about an object left behind. Now that we know this, here, follow this line, folks. So what it's saying is that this goes back to here. So the question for step number 6 flows directly from step number 3. Now, step number 7 isn't going on 6. Okay, please, if I'm not being clear, folks, please tap chat. If you know there's something that I'm not clarifying, please let me know, because this is an important part of clarifying logic and being able to put things down. So step 6 is a direct question off the learning that we got from 1 out of 4. If 1 kav and 4 amas in a machnashta de beidari, in a threshing floor, is the threshold of what you thresh, of what you're allowed to keep. So step 6 says, well, how about if it's 1/2 and 2? Let's analyze it. And the reason is it more of a bother, or is it more about the object? Now, step number 7 isn't going on step number 6. Step number 7 also, let me pick a different color. Step number 7 also goes back to the previous learning. Okay, folks? Look, this step 7 isn't on step 6. The question of, well, 2 out of 8 could just as well go on step 3. In fact, one way, Mel, I'll beat you to the punch. I'll beat you to Mel, let me know if you have a better way to explain it, go for it. You could flip around 7 and 6 and the Gemara would be logically solid, okay? If you flip 6 and 7 and you put them in the other order, you could just as well have done that. You say, well, kav ba'arba amas is this. How about 2 kav and 8 amas? There's no reason that this had to be before this, right? Step 6 did not have to be before 7 because they're both going back on step number 3. Now, if I was talking too fast, and we're done with today's learning, if I was talking too fast and I just ran through this last piece, please drop me a chat and say, hey, Rabbi, what were you talking about? And I'll try to go over it a different way. One last time. The beauty and what's helpful about this chart is that it helps clarify the logic. I promise you folks, if you get this straight, you'll have the Gemara clearer than some folks who've been learning Gemara all their life and aren't doing this. Like, they'll know it, but when you get to do this granular work of figuring out where the steps go, that's what Rav Silverwood was saying. That's what he did as a young man in yeshiva. He made sure that he really had it straight. What is step number 7 going on? It's not going on 5, because 5 was a mistake that we made. Thank you, Mel, right? 5 clarifies 3. Now that we're at 3 here, so then step number 6 asks a question on 3. Well, what is it happening? And then step number 7 asks a question also on 3. So right now, this is where we're at, where we're asking 2 questions that both of them go back to step 3. It so happens that 6 appeared before 7 in the Gemara, but it did not have to be this way. This is where we leave it. And tomorrow we're going to wrap up the sugya. We're going to wrap up this topic with another few questions like these 2 that will go to different types of fruits that have different attributes. Some are smaller and more valuable. Some are larger and different like that. We're going to stop for the night. Does anybody